So I'll now start the presentation itself. So the title is Installing the GData Management Server. And I'd like to explain the purpose of the management server itself, the secondary server, and also the subnet servers. Before I go any further, I see there's a question come up. Okay, it's just a good morning from Richard. So hello, Richard. The next one is to go through the installation steps. I mean, it's all very simple to install, but I'd just like to go through the steps and show you a few things that you have to watch out for during the installation. And also the post-installation tasks. These are the things that sometimes get forgotten about, but they are important. So first of all, the system requirements. The management server itself will not run on Linux operating systems. This will only run on Windows operating systems. So we support not only server operating systems, but also desktop operating systems. So this means you don't have to have a dedicated server to run the GData Management Console. 2016 is also supported, and as you see, Windows 10 is also supported. So we are compatible with Windows 10. You'll find in the documentation that you require a minimum of 1 GB of RAM. This really is the very lowest you can go to, and if you can, I would certainly recommend that you install more than 1 GB if possible. This, before you've actually got everything up and running, it's very difficult to actually say how much RAM you will require. It's only when it's up and running you'll see how much RAM is being used by that system. So that's one thing to keep your eye on after setting everything up and installing all of your clients. It does require the .NET framework version 4.0. If this isn't available on that machine you're installing to, it will install it automatically in the background during the installation of the management server. So if you are planning to use that patch management module, it certainly requires a lot more resources than the antivirus or the endpoint protection or client security. So in this case, you must have at least 4 GB of RAM and 4 CPUs. So if you have installations out there already of the patch management and you're seeing it's a bit slow, this could probably be the reason. It's you've not got enough RAM in there. And also to use a full version of Microsoft SQL, not the SQL Express. So the main purpose of that management server is basically just to download the virus signatures from the internet and program updates and distribute these to its connected clients. And of course, together with the administration console, any configuration changes that you make to your clients will be pushed out by the management server. And of course, if it's downloading virus signatures, it must have permanent internet access. GData is providing hourly signature updates, so that management server requires permanent internet access to make sure that you have the current versions of the virus signatures. You can install to a virtual PC. It doesn't matter whether it's VMware or any other flavor of a virtual PC. As you know, it's probably one of the perhaps one of the best methods, because if you do require more RAM or more hard disk space, you can quite easily change the configuration of that virtual machine to accommodate that without having to add more hardware to a PC. I'll go through the slides of the installation, and I'll go through some of the points that we have to, after the post-installation points, But I will be showing you the console after I've gone through the PowerPoint, just to make it easier for you to find out where all these different settings are to be found. So for the installation, once you've inserted your installation DVD or whatever you're using, the menu will pop up for the installation of the management server, the administrator, the security client, and all the rest of it. So if you select that GData Management Server, it will also install the GData Administrator, the one you see below it. So you don't have to install that administrator after installing the management server. It will install everything that you require to run that management server. So once you've selected that, just click on Next, accept the license agreement, and select the installation path or accept the default path. So really there's only two questions you're going to be asked during that installation, and the first one is which type of server do you want to install? Every installation must have a main server. And as I pointed out, this is the server that distributes the updates to the clients and the configuration changes. You also here have the choice of installing a secondary server or a subnet server. I'll be talking a bit later what a secondary server is and what the role of the subnet server is. So select that main server, and the next thing that will be popping up is which type of database you want to install. It's recommended if you have more than or less than 1,000 clients that you should use that Microsoft SQL Express. I would actually recommend that even if you have 500 clients, if you're above 500 clients, I wouldn't recommend that SQL Express. The reason for this is there is a limitation on the size of the database for Express, which is 2 gigabytes. So if you're using all of the modules, for example, patch management, endpoint protection, it could mean that this database is going to grow quite quickly and it will exceed that 2 gigabyte limit. So if you have the choice, I would always go for a full SQL server. So you can either install that SQL Express if it's a smaller network, or if there is an available SQL server already in the network, you can select this. So if it's not available, it will install it in the background. These are the only SQL servers that we do actually support, SQL Express and the full MS SQL. So that is really all that's asked during the installation. The next thing that will come up is whether you want to enter your license key. If you do not register the product, it will not download virus signatures. It is not able to download virus signatures. So it makes sense at this point to actually register the product. Also, what registration does is it's checking to see which product has been purchased by the customer. So it's checking in our database what product has the customer purchased. And during the next update of the virus signatures, it will then activate the correct features for that product. So if you're only seeing the features for antivirus and you purchased, for example, endpoint protection, and this could be one of the reasons why you're not seeing those features for that product. You haven't yet activated or you haven't yet updated your virus signatures. So these will only become visible. So when you update your virus signatures for the first time, it's checking to see which product has been registered, and then it will activate the correct features for that product. You may already have registered the product, and you might just be moving that management server to another machine. This means that you will have received access data from GData. So when you've registered, that license key, it will create access data. From this point onwards, you only use your access data. That key cannot be re-registered. So for example, if we are moving the management server from one machine to another, after installation, we can just enter the access data that we've already received. Or we can, if we choose, just activate later. Make sure that you keep your access data in a safe place. I don't know what's happened here, but my screen's just died. Oh no, it's... So my screen just went black there for some reason. Okay, this is where we left off. Yeah, as I was saying, keep your data in a safe place. If you don't, or for example, you might be on site out of working hours, you're reinstalling a management server, and you haven't got the access data, which means you have to contact GData to receive this data from them. And of course, this all takes time. So once it's activated, the installation will continue and complete. A reboot of that server isn't required. In the programs group, you will find your GData programs and the GData administrator. Also, there will be an icon on the desktop. So you click on the icon and you log into the console. The first time that you log in, you must use Windows authentication. The other possibility is to use integrated authentication. I'll talk about that in a second. So for the first login, you must belong to either a local administrators group or a domain administrators group, and you're just using your Windows credentials to log in to that management server. If you want to use the integrated authentication, you must first log into the console. You must actually create that user and then log back out, and then this user can log into the console. So the integrated user, it has the advantage that it doesn't have to be someone that's on your Windows network. So it's not a member of your Windows network. For example, there might be a contractor. You want to give him access to that console for a certain period of time. So you can create an integrated user that he can use. The next thing you'll see is the setup wizard. This will assist you in configuring that management server. For example, you can configure your email notifications, how often the internet updates take place. This is one thing you should keep in mind. Once you install that management server, it will not automatically download internet updates. You have to configure this to download those updates automatically. The default setting is on manual. So if you don't do this, your management server will never receive virus signature updates, which, believe it or not, happens very often. If you're using the mobile device management, this can also be configured, as well as installing to your GData to your clients. If you don't want to use the wizard, you can just cancel out of this, and all of these tasks can be done directly from the console. This is just an assistance to you. So let's go on to the post-installation tasks. One of the first things to do is to make sure that you do have the current version of the software. To update the software, you go to that program group and you select your internet update. This will search for any current versions, and it will also enable you to update your virus signatures for the first time. And it also will activate the correct features for your product. So this is what internet update looks like. So once you've started internet update, you'll see here that once you've registered, your username and password is automatically entered into the corresponding fields. If you decided when you were installing that management server that you'd wanted to register later, this is where you can do it via the online registration. If you're using a proxy server to access the internet, this is where it can be configured. In the past, we had our update servers in various regions throughout the world, and it was necessary to actually select the fastest server for your region. It wasn't necessarily in North Africa that the servers in Africa were the fastest. It might have been servers in Europe. We're now working with Akamai, which means that the distribution of these update servers, they cover a lot more than we used to do. So this isn't as important as it used to be, but you can still check to see if you do have the slow download speeds, it might, changing to another region might actually assist. So here we can check for any newer versions of the software. You are only required to update the server program files. For historical reasons, we still have the button in there, the update the program files for the client. In the past, these were two separate tasks that you had to run, updating the server files and updating the client files. Now everything is done via the server update. And finally, update those VARA signatures. So the next thing to do is to configure that management server before you even start rolling out clients. This will make sure that you have the correct operation and for the following features. One of them is the purging of log files and reports. The default setting for the purging of log files and reports is that it's deactivated. So this isn't going to happen. And if you don't do it, your hard disk will just fill up with logs and reports. But we'll have a look in a minute where you can actually find this and how to do it. Of course, email notifications you've got to set up your email server to receive alarms, notifications, and also to send out the installation link if you're going to use your mobile device management. So you've got to have a possibility to send out the installation link to your mobile users. Also setting up the removal of decommissioned clients. So clients that are no longer in use, they will remain in that console unless you've configured that they should be removed after a certain period of time. So setting this, for example, to 30 days, if someone hasn't been on that network or hasn't connected to that management for 30 days, it will be removed from the console. If, however, someone has been on vacation for more than 30 days and they do come back to their PC, the PC connects to that management server, it doesn't mean that we've completely deleted that client. The client will move back to that management or appear in the management console again. It will no longer be in the group it was beforehand. So if you had this client in a certain group beforehand, after deletion it will no longer be a member of this group. So it means moving that client back to that group. The synchronization period between clients and management server, usually this will not have to be configured. It's set to a default time of 5 minutes. So every 5 minutes, the clients are checking with the management server to see whether there's any VARA signature updates or if there's been any configuration changes. The only reason that you'd have to change this if you're seeing that in larger networks, I'm talking about 300-400 clients, that the clients, you can see that they are connecting to the management server. You can see this in the console, whether they have connection or not. but they are not receiving their virus signatures. So their virus signatures might be out of date, even though everything else seems to be okay. In this case, you could increase that synchronization period so the clients aren't queuing up on the management server to get their virus signatures. But these are things it's more trial and error. We can't give you a figure and say, for example, for 300 clients, it must be set to 6 minutes. There's so many factors that can affect whether clients will receive their definitions correctly or not. For example, the speed of the network, how much, or the CPU on that management server. There's a lot of things. So there's a lot of trial and error in this. So you've got to, after installing and having that running for a couple of days, you should be checking to see if everything's okay. And if not, then make the necessary adjustments. So this is where you can purge your log files and reports. So the clients, they're sending all their log files to the management server where they're stored together with reports. And if you're using the patch management, and also the deployed patches. And you can imagine, if you're using patch management, the patch files themselves, they could be quite large in size. So if you're not purging them now again, it's going to fill up your hard disk. So make sure that under the server settings in the console that you do clean up your log files. How often you do this might be dictated by a security policy, but just make sure you do configure this. So to the email notifications and reports, to receive any notifications or reports, then you must set up your mail server. In this window, you can create mail groups for groups of recipients that should at some stage receive alerting or receive reports. You can see here that it is set to port 25. Nowadays, there's a lot of mail servers will only accept encrypted mail. However, you can leave this at 25 and it will automatically negotiate the correct port. So if it's using encrypted mail, it will change it. You won't see it visibly. It'll still remain on 25, but in the background, it has changed it to the correct port for that mail server. So the only way of actually seeing whether your mail settings are correct or not is under the report manager is to create a report and send it per email. And if that email is not being received, then you know that you've got something wrong with your email settings. So there's certain things that we can notify you per email, and this is first of all the alarms, which you will also find under the options. And first of all, you can select who will actually receive the alarms. One of them is the virus detection. So if we have virus detections that someone will be notified per email, you see above that we do have a limit. So the recipients aren't going to be spammed with email if there is some sort of virus outbreak. So we can limit this, as you see here, for not more than one mail every half an hour. If our virus signatures are outdated on that management server, then we want to know about it. As I said, we're updating hourly, so if the virus signatures are 2 days out of date, we know that there's something wrong on that management server. The next one is reporting on corrupted virus signatures. Now and again, what happens is during the download process of the virus signatures, there could be an internet outage or whatever. The virus signatures on the management server might be corrupt. In some cases, the management server will actually distribute the corrupt virus databases. or virus signature databases. Usually this isn't a problem because after an hour, the management server will update again and distribute the good signatures. However, if there are problems with those virus signature databases, you do want to have a look just to make sure that this isn't a permanent problem, that it is only a temporary problem. If you're using client security or endpoint protection and have implemented the firewall, you might have created a firewall rule that is blocking certain applications that maybe shouldn't have been blocked. So these blocked applications, they will be reported and you will receive an alert per email. And the last one is with the policy manager. So this is in endpoint protection. You can create policies to block access to websites, block access to certain hardware devices, or block access to applications. And here again, if you have blocked something that a user must have access to, what happens is the user will get a pop-up when he tries to access this application, for example, and he can send a request to the management server that he requires to use that application or hardware device. You will then be notified per email that someone is trying to access a device or application. So here again, if you've created a policy and perhaps if you block something that you shouldn't have, you will get informed. You will be informed about it. It will notify you. And to check all of this, we can just trigger the test alarm. You will receive an email, and in the console itself, in the bottom right hand, you will see a blinking virus alert. And this is from the test alarm. As I said, when you install the management server, the internet update, as you see in this case, by automatic updates, is set to manual. So unless you change this, the management server will never update the virus signatures. So this is it's most important that you do change this. So you go onto your virus database, then onto your automatic updates, and select how often you would like those signatures to be updated. So let's move on to the SUBNET server and the purpose of the SUBNET server. In many organizations, you might have remote offices. You all know the problem. These remote offices, they usually have very little bandwidth, and if every single PC in that remote location downloads its virus signatures from that main management server in the main location, it will probably use up a lot of that bandwidth. So I'll just go back. My screen just went black again. So these decentralized locations with limited bandwidth, it makes sense to actually install a subnet server in these locations. The subnet server is the one that connects to that main management server, downloads any updates and distributes them to the clients in that location. So this will be reducing the amount of data that is going across that connection. This is especially important if you're updating the program files. If there's a new version, the program updates will be very large. And if you're distributing them to every single PC in that location, you could actually block that connection completely. So it's not just the signature and configuration updates it receives, it also distributes program updates to those PCs that have been assigned to it. And in the other direction, the clients will upload their logs to the subnet server, and the subnet server in turn will upload those logs to the management server. So the installation of a subnet server, this can either be done locally from the installation medium, or it can actually be done remotely from the administration console. So during that installation of that subnet server, it's going to ask you the name of the main server. Usually you'll use the host name for that machine, so you've got to make sure that DNS is working on that network. If for whatever reason there are problems with DNS, you could use the IP address of that main server. But it is quite important that your DNS is working correctly in any network you're installing to, because the clients also have to resolve that main manager host name to be able to communicate correctly. The subnet server also has its own database that is synchronized with the database of the main server. Here you can actually use the SQL database because usually that subnet server will not be supporting as many clients as the main server and will not have as much data as that main server. Once that subnet server has been installed, you still, however, have to install the GData security client. Installing the subnet server does not include the security client, so that must be installed once that subnet server is up and running. So in the remote installation, first of all, in the console, you'd select admin, then manage servers. Then you'd have to select your main server. You can see this in that grey bar at the top, the main server 11. So that is our main server. So you select that main server. There might be multiple main servers in your network, but you want to select the server that you want your subnet server to connect to. Then you select add the subnet server. You select that subnet server or enter the name. Your domain admin credentials or administrator credentials for that machine. And once the installation has completed, you now have to assign clients to that subnet server. So again, you have to open that Manage Servers window. You select your new subnet server that you've just installed, and then you assign the clients to it. Some clients or all clients will already be assigned to that main server at this point. So if this is the first subnet server, all of your clients will be assigned to that main server. So now you can select them to be allocated to that subnet server. Well, that was a bit quick. So you've got to select the clients that will be connecting to that subnet server. You can do all of this at a later date as well. So any client in the console, you can at any point in time say, I want to assign it to a subnet server. So the next thing we go on to is the secondary server and the purpose of this secondary server. So the only purpose really is to provide high availability. So if at any time that main management server fails, the clients will automatically connect to that secondary server after 1 hour. So 1 hour of no connection to that main management server, they will move to the secondary server. Of course, both these servers, the main server and the secondary server, will be using a shared database. So it makes sense to put that database on a third PC. If you have the database on the main server and that main server fails, and of course the secondary server will have no access to that data. So if you want to use a secondary server, this means you have to have two machines, one for the main server, one for the secondary server, and another machine for the database. So this is just an example of how this is implemented. You can see here that we have roughly in the middle there, we have the GData Management Server. with the administrator. This is connecting to the Microsoft SQL database. And together on the left there with the GData Secondary Management Server, they're both connecting to the SQL database. This could be a SQL cluster. It might be a higher availability cluster. And there's nothing really that, or there isn't anything at all that you have to configure to use a clustered SQL database. So if you're asked whether we're supporting clusters, yes, we are supporting clustered databases. So as I said, if the main server fails, the clients will automatically go to that secondary server. If the main server is back online, then the clients will automatically move back. So once they're in that failover mode, you've still got all possibilities to configure those clients to download updates and distribute to your clients. Okay, the next webinar will be installing the GData security client. So we'll go through the installation and all the problems that you might occur during installation. This will be on the 25th of February. We'll also be giving an overview of version 14 very shortly. The release of version 14 will be about the middle of March. So before this time, we will actually be presenting the new features of that for version 14. So at this point, I'll just check to see if there's any open questions that I have. Oh yes, there's there's a lot of questions. As I said, it's a bit difficult during the presentation to actually answer the questions. But so can the management server install on Hyper-V and Citrix Zen or only VMware? No, as I said, you can install this on any flavor of virtual machine. This isn't a problem at all. The next question is, can you set a time limitation when a user requests to access a URL? This will be with the endpoint protection. There isn't a time limitation at all. So the answer to that is no. So the next question, is the data that is stored in the SQL for the subnet server, or will it be stored in the main server? There is, most of the data is stored on that main server, but as I said, the subnet server does synchronize with that main server. For example, program updates, they will be stored on that subnet server, so they can be pushed out to those clients at any time. Another question from Richard, can you change the default of 1 year to another time? I'm not actually sure what you meant by that, Richard, which year 1 year you meant. So perhaps we can discuss this later. I'm not sure. 1 hour, okay. I presume you're talking about the virus signature updates. No, you can't. That's the minimum amount of time. So once an hour, you can download those virus signatures. You can increase the time, but you can't decrease it below 1 hour. Okay, the next question from Hakim is, if the number of client installations is high, can we install clients in parts to save network bandwidth? Yes, you can. Installing the clients, you can either select just a single client and install it, or you can select a number of clients to install. It's up to you. I mean, you'd know probably the network better than I would. But it is possible to select one or more PCs for a simultaneous installation. Okay, the 1 hour failover. Sorry, I thought you were talking. So Richard was asking about the failover time. As I said, it takes 1 hour for the clients to move from the main server to that secondary server. You cannot change the time. No, this is set to 1 hour. So there's nothing we can do about that. So what I'd like to do now is just open that management console up just to show you a few other things if you don't know it already, where to find these points that I've been talking about. And one of them was the authentication. As I said, the first time you log into the console, you have to use the Windows authentication. But there is a possibility to use the integrated authentication. So logging into for the first time, I'm using my Windows domain password or local admin password. So I'm now in the console, and I'll show you where, for example, you can actually create the integrated users. So you go to admin, onto manage users, select new, and you can just create a user. And as I said, the advantage of this is that you do not, if someone requires access to that console who's not part of your Windows network, you can create an integrated user. And you can give him certain permissions. So you can give him just a read permission if you wish, read write, or read write and restore backups. At this point, I'd just like to say the backups, they are only available when you purchase mail security. I know it's a bit of a strange combination, mail security and backups, but that's the way it is. And I'm afraid this is the reason for this. They're historical reasons. It's how we used to license the products, and that hasn't changed. So if you do require to use the backup feature, it means that you have to purchase the mail security. Okay, so that's easy to understand. And you can also create here Windows users. So you can create a Windows user that isn't necessarily a domain admin or a local admin, so any Windows user can also have access to that console. Most of the settings that you require for the post-installation task you'll find under Options. And first of all, we have the Internet Update. And this is where you configure how often the management server will perform updates, download those updates from the internet. You can see here that we have a peer-to-peer update distribution as well. This isn't really part of this webinar, but I'll talk about it briefly anyway. Normally, a client will receive virus signatures directly from that management server. There will, however, be cases where you can activate peer-to-peer distribution so that the client would check with its neighbors to see which of those neighbors has the current virus signatures. This means it won't necessarily go to the management server. It could receive those updates from any of its neighbors. Neighbors is based on the amount of network hops, and you can configure this to say if the management server is, for example, 3 network hops away, my neighbor is only 2 network hops away, then I will try first of all to download my virus signatures from that neighbor. So this is another method you can use, especially with sort of remote locations, that they will download from their neighbors, not necessarily from that management server or even from that subnet server. Then here's the alarms. This is where you set your alarms, and you can select the groups that you want your alarms to be sent to. And you can trigger your test alarm. And if this works correctly, you will see here in the bottom right hand corner, it should you'll see a red warning saying there's a virus or a virus alarm. I didn't talk about this. This is very important during the installation of that management console. Initially, this is you can roll back your virus signatures. So if you do have virus signatures that are corrupt or causing any sorts of problems on that network, you can go back to virus signatures that were working correctly. And you can do this for either the Bitdefender signatures or for the GData's own signatures. So you can go back, roll back to signatures that were working correctly. And it looks like I've got a problem with this PC here. The screen keeps on going black for some reason. And we'll go back to the server settings. Okay, and in the server settings, you'll find here, as I said, the number of rollbacks you want to keep. Because if you're the default is you're keeping 5 sets of virus signatures on that management server. Of course, if you're keeping a lot more than that, this will also take up hard disk space on that machine. And here you can set how long you'd like to keep your log files and reports. And this is by default not activated. So make sure that you activate this after installation of the management server. Then we have the email settings. So as I said, you can leave that at port 2025 and it will auto negotiate the correct port for your mail server. Here is the synchronization. So first of all, you have the synchronization of the clients with the management server. The default is 5 minutes. I've reduced this to 1 minute because I only have one PC connecting to this management server. So what this means is the client is connecting every minute to that management server. So any changes that have been made, the client will receive them within 5 minutes. If I increase this, it will now take 10 minutes, or it could take 10 minutes until the client receives any changes made on that management server. And as I said, the only reason you may have to change this is if clients are not receiving their virus signatures. Even though they're connecting to the management server, you've done all your network troubleshooting, you can see the client's connecting, but it's not receiving virus signatures. It could be because it's just queuing up on that management server because the synchronization time is too low. And here you can also set the synchronization period for your subnet server and also for Active Directory. So if you've imported your clients from Active Directory, you have Active Directory groups in your console. If there's any changes made to Active Directory, they will appear in your console, in this case after 6 hours, but you can again reduce this period if you wish. So really that is all I wanted to show you today. We'll go through as I said, the client installation in the next webinar session, and version 14 with all of the new features. We'll be doing a webinar on that. I've just got to organize the time, but you will be informed when this is going to take place. So at this point, I'd like to thank you for joining. I hope you enjoyed it. And of course, if you do have any further questions, you can always send me the questions, or I have an email address, or we have an email address where you can send these questions to. So thank you very much for joining, and I'd like to say goodbye now. So, bye then. Have a good day.